Welcome back. This is All Angles on eNCA. Now, despite ongoing concerns, oil giant Shell will be going ahead with its oil and gas survey of the Wild Coast. This comes after courts dismissed an application brought forward by environmentalists. Environmentalists, what's happening? Brought forward by environmentalists to stop the survey. Activists have vowed to continue protesting. They say that the seismic blasts will disturb marine life and could even affect migration patterns. But the oil giant maintains that hundreds of surveys around the world have had no impact. Well, let's discuss this with Phindile Masangane from the Petroleum Agency South Africa, which grants permits for exploration. Thank you so much, Dr. Masangane, for joining me in this conversation. So for the benefit of those who really don't know what this 3D survey, blast survey that Shell is undertaking off the Wild Coast, what are you able to share with us in as simple a language as possible for us to understand what is behind this debate?
Thank you, Thulasizwe. I think the first word that I would like us to do away with is the word blasting. So there is no blasting in the East Coast. What is happening is that Shell will release pressurized air into the sea surface in order to get data. So as the acoustics waves bounce back into the surface, it sends receivers. It's received by receivers on the vessel, and then they are able to understand the geology beneath the seabed. So that is the technology. It is compressed air that is being discharged into the seabed.
And I'm glad I asked that question because I actually appreciate that big difference, because a word like blast is usually emotionally charged and gets people charged up. But there is a concern nonetheless, even though it is not necessarily a blast in terms of how the survey is being done, compressed air, as you just explained. But nonetheless, there is that concern that has been raised by environmentalists and organizations that are about the preservation of marine life. Your understanding of how much risk is involved to marine life?
Thulasizwe, the air that is being compressed into the seabed indeed does make a lot of noise. But this noise is not noise that is well or astronomically above other noise that is made by other commercial activities. For instance, it is still within the vicinity of the noise that is made by large commercial shipping vessels. And you can imagine these vessels use the sea for transportation. And we still have to this day a lot of our marine mammals intact, and they have not been diminished by the commercial shipping industry. Indeed, in this case, what is even better when it comes to seismic data collection for the oil and gas industry is that we are able to put mitigation plans in place in order to protect the marine life. So as the Petroleum Agency of South Africa, we know that this activity does have an impact on marine life, but we are saying that there are mitigation measures that are implemented to minimize the impact to marine life. For example, if you allow me to go on.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. If you allow me to go on, for example, prior to the air guns being released and the compressed air being released into the environment, there is what we call a pre-watch activity for an hour, whereby they release some sensors into the surface just to gauge how much marine mammals are there in the vicinity. And if there are any, they do what they call a soft start, whereby they make very lighter sound. And as you know, it is very natural then for the marine mammals to swim away from the vicinity of where the compressed air will be released. So as such, by the time you reach the high levels of air compression release, you actually have an exclusion zone of up to 500 meters.
I suppose part of the debate, Dr. Masangane, has to do with what it is that Shell is exploring for and conducting this survey for. It is about oil and gas exploration in a world where we've just come back from, that COP meeting, COP, I believe it was 26, that was taking place recently, and issues such as the use of fossil fuels, hydrocarbons, is being debated at the moment. And you, with your wealth of experience, you have your own view about the use of oil and gas, particularly gas on the African continent. What's your take? We are talking now about, moving away from using coal, which is on the one end of the spectrum in terms of, its release of gases. And we have then on the other end, not far from coal, but a bit of a distance, let's say, from coal, you have gas. And you say there's still a role for gas in the energy mix of Africa.
There definitely is a role for gas in Africa's energy mix. Tula Sizwe, you will know that the renewable energy technologies are still intermittent. Of course, we know that energy storage technologies, batteries that can store the electricity, are now available, but the cost of these energy storage technologies are still much higher than if you were to use gas for power generation. Coupled with that is not just the issue of intermittency of renewable energy technologies, but there are certain ancillary services that the gas-to-power technologies provide to our grid in stabilizing our grid. These are called the frequency as well as the inertia. So those are very important to South Africa's electricity grid. As you know, we've got very long transmission lines, and these services that stabilize the grid are not available from renewable energy technologies. So for us as South Africa, gas still plays a very, very important role and will continue to play an important role. The International Energy Agency, in its Net Zero 2050 report, also acknowledges the role of gas in Africa's energy mix to make sure that indeed we've got baseload capacity, we stabilize our grids as we transition to a clean energy future.
Dr. Masangane, I'm completely out of time, but I can't not ask you this question. If I'm watching this interview with you and reading some of your writings around what's happening off the Wild Coast, should I be concerned as a person observing, an outside observer, that you, for starters, clarify, do you have a licensing role or a regulatory oversight role over what Shell is doing, which would lead to me being concerned to say, oh, the Petroleum Agency South Africa, look at them, they've already made up their minds that it's A-OK what Shell is doing. Should I be worried about your role within this value chain?
The Petroleum Agency South Africa, PASA, is actually the regulatory authority. So the minister grants the license, and our role as PASA is to make sure that all those that are licensed comply with their conditions of license. One of those conditions of license is the environmental management program, which has been issued to Shell. So our role is to make sure that indeed they comply. These mitigation measures that I've spoken about are implemented to the letter. We have to make sure that all the impact is minimized. So that's our role, and South Africans should not be scared of what's going on.
Thank you for that, Dr. Phindile Masangane. Good engaging with you on this topic. She absolutely explained those processes quite clearly. I got them, and it takes me a while sometimes to understand some of these issues. This is All Angles on eNCA.